The dust hadn't settled here in 27 years. Malcolm's boots broke the silence of Tranquility Harbor, a lunar ghost town preserved like a museum exhibit. His robot companion Bob scanned the empty corridors, his question hanging in the thin air. "Are you absolutely certain this is worth the risk?" And they were running on borrowed oxygen and desperate hope, about to uncover why an entire colony vanished without a trace. A low hiss came from Malcolm's life support pack. The sound repeated every 4 minutes as the system recycled air. It reminded him of 3 creditors waiting at Ceres Station and the lean on his ship. They had parked their enforcement vessels in high orbit like patient carrion birds watching for weakness. Each shutdown of the oxygen recycler tightened the financial noose around his neck. Salvage rights here represented his final chance to pay his debts. Nothing else remained. Bob's photoreceptors swept the corridor with methodical precision. The robot's internal display showed their oxygen consumption rate at 2.3 liters per minute. Malcolm's patched environment suit had 3 visible seals on the torso section and 2 on the legs. One knee joint had been repaired with epoxy and a strip of thermal tape. The repairs had held through 6 previous salvage runs but showed signs of fatigue. Every movement in the low gravity felt expensive. Each step consumed air that he couldn't replace. The robot calculated their survival odds at 47% if they reached the central dome within 20 minutes. His diagnostics showed fuel reserves at 12% capacity and dropping. The lander's reactor had developed a slow leak during descent. They had bypassed 3 active security beacons on their approach, each violation adding another count to their criminal record. Consortium enforcement would add trespassing and unauthorized salvage to their existing charges. The silence around them felt heavier than the moon's gravity, pressing down on their limited time. Malcolm checked his wrist display. The numbers glowed with relentless clarity. 27 minutes of oxygen remained at current consumption rates. Their lander waited half a kilometer away across the barren surface. It sat as a small metallic speck against the overwhelming darkness of the lunar landscape. The vehicle's distress beacon remained inactive to avoid detection. Its aging reactor continued to leak radiation into the vacuum. This expedition represented his final opportunity to escape a past of bad contracts and worse decisions. He had sold everything except the ship itself to fund this desperate gamble. The robot's calm analysis of their deteriorating situation provided no comfort, only cold facts. Bob projected their chances of successful extraction at 34%. If they found valuable salvage within the next 15 minutes. The numbers kept dropping with each passing second. Malcolm adjusted his grip on the scanning equipment and moved deeper into the silent facility. His boots left faint impressions in the dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Tranquility. Harbor's central dome rose from the dust like a silver monument against the star-dusted blackness of the lunar sky. Its curvature showed no meteorite impacts or radiation discoloration across the polished surface. The structure appeared flawless after decades of isolation, its metallic sheen reflecting their helmet lights in perfect arcs. Bob's sensors registered atmosphere retention at 98% efficiency, a figure that defied normal degradation patterns. The habitation modules stood sealed and waiting, their dust rings intact around every entry point. They passed processing facilities where machinery sat paused mid-cycle. Conveyor belts held mineral containers in exact positions as if workers had stepped away moments earlier. Control panels glowed with standby indicators, their screens showing system readiness instead of error messages. The power grid emitted a steady hum at minimal operational levels that normal backup systems couldn't sustain beyond a few months. Malcolm noted the absence of personal effects that typically accumulated in long-term habitats. No family photographs adorned the walls. No favorite mug sat beside workstations. No individual decorations marked sleeping quarters. The habitation module doors revealed interiors through perfectly clear observation windows. Each room showed bare mattresses on frames and empty storage compartments. Drawers hung open in uniform positions as if someone had systematically removed all personal belongings. Kitchen areas displayed cleaned surfaces with no food residue or discarded packaging. Medical bays contained sterilized equipment, but no patient records or prescription containers. This wasn't the chaotic abandonment of emergency evacuation. It resembled the methodical clearing of evidence after careful planning. Bob's motion sensors detected no biological residue in the air filtration systems. The environmental controls maintained exact temperature and humidity levels, despite the absence of occupants. Malcolm ran his glove along a cafeteria counter and found no dust accumulation on the surface. The entire colony functioned with mechanical precision that suggested ongoing maintenance rather than preservation. They moved through connecting galleries where their footsteps echoed against curved walls. The sound traveled farther than it should in the thin atmosphere, creating unnatural reverberations. Malcolm paused at a viewport overlooking the central plaza. Empty benches sat in neat rows beneath artificial lighting that mimicked Earth's daylight cycle. Recreation equipment showed no wear on handles or seats. The simulation screens that normally displayed terrestrial landscapes remained dark but powered. Every detail pointed toward deliberate decommissioning rather than disaster. Someone had carefully removed all traces of human presence while keeping the infrastructure fully operational. The evidence suggested orderly evacuation protocols executed with military precision. They continued toward the dome's core section, where larger control systems would be located. Bob's internal clock marked 18 minutes of oxygen remaining at their current consumption rate. The robot's sensors began detecting faint energy signatures that pulsed at regular intervals from deeper within the complex. Malcolm adjusted his scanner to trace the source while maintaining visual checks on their retreat path. The pristine condition of everything around them felt increasingly unnerving. Normal abandonment created decay patterns. This place showed intentional preservation for some future reactivation. Their helmet lights carved through the darkness of a main corridor leading toward administrative sections. The flooring showed no scuff marks from years of foot traffic. Wall panels displayed information screens that still cycled through colony regulations and safety procedures. Emergency equipment lockers remained sealed with intact security tags. Malcolm noted the absence of warning signs or evacuation notices that should have been posted during any emergency departure. The silence felt different here, not empty but waiting. They moved forward with increased caution, their scanners active and weapons ready. Bob's antennae twitched toward the central dome, catching a rhythm in the static. The motion was slight but precise, an involuntary response to energy patterns his systems couldn't immediately categorize. His sensors registered a pulse every 13 seconds with absolute consistency. The intervals showed no variation across 7 consecutive cycles. Malcolm's handheld scanner flickered with each energy surge, its display struggling to maintain a stable reading. The device normally locked onto frequencies within milliseconds, but this pattern defied its standard analysis protocols. The pulses grew stronger as they approached the dome's main control center. Each energy spike registered at 0.3 joules higher than the previous measurement. Bob correlated the increases with their movement through the facility. His internal mapping showed the pulses originating from 3 separate locations that formed a triangular pattern around the central chamber. The robot's analysis indicated the energy was cycling through standby systems across the entire colony. Environmental controls, power distribution, and communication networks all received micro-increments of energy with each pulse. Malcolm watched his scanner's display fluctuate with the rhythm. The device showed frequency shifts that shouldn't occur in automated maintenance cycles. Standard colony systems operated on randomized schedules to prevent pattern recognition. This regularity suggested conscious design, rather than automated function. The 13-second interval matched no known security sweep or diagnostic routine in the consortium's operational manuals. The pattern felt intentional, like a heartbeat maintaining stability through precise repetition. Bob's internal clock marked the pulses against their oxygen consumption. Each 13-second cycle consumed 0.1 liters from their reserves. The robot calculated they had experienced 43 pulses since first detection. His systems mapped the energy distribution patterns across the colony's infrastructure. Each pulse triggered minor activations in different sectors: lighting systems in Module 7, air circulation in Sector 12, power relays in the central core. The pattern wasn't random decay but coordinated preservation. The energy signature intensified near a sealed doorway labeled Central Control. Malcolm's scanner displayed frequency fluctuations that made the numbers blur. The device's processor couldn't maintain a stable lock on the source. Bob detected secondary pulses now occurring at 6.5-second intervals between the primary cycles. The new pattern suggested system preparation rather than simple maintenance. His analysis indicated the entire colony was transitioning toward active status, despite decades of isolation. They followed the strengthening pulses down a corridor that sloped gently downward. The lighting panels brightened slightly with each energy surge, then dimmed to standby levels. The effect created a rhythmic breathing pattern in the artificial environment. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 14 minutes remaining at current consumption rates. The numbers dropped another digit as they paused to study the phenomenon. Each decision to continue cost them precious air. Bob's sensors detected a third harmonic pattern emerging at 26-second intervals. The complexity suggested layered systems awakening in stages. The robot compared the energy signatures to known consortium protocols and found no matches. The patterns indicated technology beyond standard colonial equipment. Malcolm adjusted his scanner's sensitivity settings, but the device continued to struggle with the fluctuating readings. The energy felt both familiar and alien, like hearing a forgotten language spoken with perfect accent but unknown words. They reached a reinforced doorway that pulsed with visible energy patterns. The metal surface showed faint concentric rings of light that expanded outward from the center every 13 seconds. The display wasn't designed for human observation. It served some other purpose in the colony's hidden functionality. Malcolm placed his glove against the door and felt a subtle vibration through his suit material. The sensation repeated with the same steady rhythm they'd been tracking. Something was keeping Tranquility Harbor in perfect suspended animation, waiting for a trigger they didn't understand. Malcolm's glove brushed against a wall panel that felt different. The surface temperature registered half a degree cooler than adjacent sections. His fingertips detected microscopic seams through the suit's tactile sensors. The lines formed a perfect rectangle 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. Bob's thermal imaging revealed active cooling systems operating behind the false wall. The temperature gradient showed precise climate control maintaining conditions significantly below the corridor's ambient reading. Their scanners detected no visible controls or access panels along the smooth surface. The wall absorbed light differently than surrounding materials. Malcolm's helmet lights created faint reflections on standard panels, but disappeared into this section without bounce back. The surface seemed to drink illumination rather than reflect it. Bob's spectroscopic analysis showed materials not used in standard lunar construction. The alloy composition matched advanced stealth technology developed for military applications. The robot's database contained only theoretical references to such metamaterials. Their presence here indicated black-budget projects concealed within the civilian facility. Malcolm used ultrasonic mapping tools to trace the hidden door's outline. The device emitted high-frequency pulses that bounced back with altered resonance patterns. The scanner revealed a pressure-sealed entrance with hydraulic mechanisms on all 4 sides. The system showed no keypads, biometric readers, or manual override points. Bob detected energy conduits running along the edges that pulsed in synchronization with the colony's 13-second rhythm. Each energy surge activated microscopic sensors along the concealed seam. The seam became visible only at specific angles under directed helmet lights. When Malcolm positioned his beam at 15 degrees from the surface, a hairline fracture appeared along the perimeter. The line showed perfect mechanical precision with no visible welding or joinery marks. Bob's magnified view revealed interlocking teeth along the edges that would create an airtight seal when closed. The mechanism appeared designed to be invisible to casual inspection and standard scanning equipment. Their combined analysis suggested technology beyond consortium standards. Malcolm applied pressure to various points along the revealed seam. The surface remained unyielding until he reached the lower right quadrant. A section 3 centimeters wide depressed half a millimeter under his glove. The movement triggered nearly silent mechanism engagement behind the wall. Hydraulic systems whispered to life with a sound like breathing. The entire panel shifted inward 1 centimeter before sliding sideways into a recessed pocket. The motion produced no vibration or air displacement despite the massive weight being moved. The revealed opening showed a dark space beyond that their helmet lights couldn't immediately penetrate. Air pressure equalized with a soft hiss that fogged Malcolm's faceplate momentarily. Bob's sensors detected atmosphere composition matching the corridor, but at higher purity levels. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees as cold air spilled from the opening. Their scanners showed the space beyond extended deep into the lunar bedrock, far beyond the colony's documented dimensions. The hidden passage represented engineering on a scale that shouldn't exist in this facility. Malcolm checked his oxygen readout. 12 minutes remained at current consumption rates. The numbers glowed with urgent persistence on his wrist display. Bob calculated the probability of valuable salvage in hidden areas at 63%, based on concealment effort levels. The robot's assessment noted increased risk factors from unknown security systems. Their lander's reactor continued to leak radiation half a kilometer away across the barren surface. Each passing second decreased their chances of successful extraction. Malcolm stepped through the opening into the darkness beyond, his boots meeting a floor that felt different from the colony's standard deck plating. The material absorbed sound completely, creating unnatural silence around their movement. The hangar stretched into darkness beyond their helmet lights, a cavernous space that swallowed illumination at its edges. Their beams revealed a teardrop-shaped spacecraft resting at the center of the vast chamber, its black hull absorbing light like a cosmic void. The vessel showed no visible engines, propulsion systems, or standard docking interfaces along its smooth surface. The geometry suggested advanced aerodynamics despite the vacuum environment, with curves that flowed into sharp angles at unexpected junctions. Malcolm approached the silent craft, drawn by its unnatural proportions that defied conventional spacecraft design principles. An entry panel glowed softly at his approach, activating before he raised his hand. Biometric scanners swept across his environment suit with invisible light patterns. The system identified him as authorized personnel before he touched the interface. Bob's warning protocols activated immediately, his systems registering multiple security breaches that should have triggered alarms. The robot detected 0 defensive responses from the vessel or hangar security systems. Malcolm's credentials showed clearance levels he didn't possess, accessing systems that shouldn't recognize him at all. Malcolm had never seen this ship design in any consortium registry or black market listing. His salvage experience covered 17 years of recovering vessels from derelict stations to war wrecks. This technology matched nothing in his memory or databases. He had never visited Tranquility Harbor before today, never accessed any facility with this security level. The ship's recognition systems responded to biometric markers that consortium security would have flagged as unauthorized. Bob's analysis showed the vessel accessing identification protocols that bypassed standard verification methods. The hangar doors began sliding open without their command, massive panels retracting into reinforced walls. The movement occurred silently despite the enormous weight being shifted. External stars became visible through the expanding opening, their patterns unfamiliar through the distorted lens of the lunar horizon. Environmental systems activated throughout the hangar, pressurizing the space with air that fogged their faceplates momentarily. Lighting panels along the ceiling illuminated in sequence, revealing the full scale of the concealed facility. The activation sequence showed no manual controls or override points for interruption. Bob calculated the oxygen consumption rate at 18 liters per minute with the space pressurizing. Their suit systems adjusted to the new atmosphere automatically. Malcolm's wrist display showed 11 minutes of reserve oxygen remaining, the numbers static now that external air was available. The robot security protocols continued alerting to multiple system violations that weren't triggering defensive responses. Their presence had activated processes designed for authorized personnel, with higher clearance levels than either of them possessed. The ship's systems responded to Malcolm as if he belonged here, as if someone had programmed his biometric signature into core security protocols years earlier. The teardrop craft began emitting a low hum that vibrated through the deck plating. Its surface shimmered with energy patterns that flowed like liquid across the hull. An access ramp extended from the seamless underside, revealing an interior that glowed with soft blue light. The opening showed no visible controls or security stations, just a smooth passage into the vessel's core. Malcolm's scanner detected energy signatures that defied standard measurement scales, frequencies that shifted between readings too rapidly for analysis. Bob's threat assessment updated to include unknown technology factors that increased potential danger levels. Exponentially, the recognition system continued, treating Malcolm as cleared for access despite all logical contradictions. His identity shouldn't exist in any facility database, particularly not one that had been sealed for 27 years. The ship's response suggested either catastrophic system error or intentional programming that anticipated his arrival. Bob's historical analysis found no records of Malcolm's biometrics being recorded by consortium security forces. The vessel's knowledge of him represented either impossible coincidence or deliberate planning on a scale that defied understanding. The open hangar doors revealed the stark lunar landscape beyond, their escape path now exposed to whatever waited outside. The interior welcomed them with adaptive lighting that brightened along their path, the illumination adjusting to their movement without visible fixtures or bulbs. Seats formed from the bulkhead material as they approached, the surfaces flowing like liquid metal to meet their bodies. Control interfaces rose from the floor panels, their shapes conforming to Malcolm's hands before he made contact. The ship responded to their presence rather than their commands, anticipating needs through sensors that detected muscle tension and eye movement. Bob's analysis showed manufacturing techniques that surpassed current technology by several centuries, with material properties that defied standard classification systems. The viewport displayed the hangar, without visible screens or projection systems. The image appeared directly in their field of vision with perfect clarity and depth perception. External details showed at microscopic resolution when Malcolm focused on specific areas. The system tracked his eye movements to adjust magnification levels. Bob detected no energy emissions that would explain the display technology. The effect created seamless awareness of their surroundings, without physical interfaces blocking their view. Control surfaces continued reshaping themselves as Malcolm's hands moved, providing tactile feedback through subtle vibrations that transmitted through his gloves. The ship's systems responded to thought as much as physical interaction. Interfaces activated when Malcolm considered specific functions, their displays shifting to show relevant data streams. Environmental controls adjusted temperature and lighting based on his comfort levels without manual input. Bob monitored neural activity patterns that the ship's sensors were detecting through non-invasive scanning. The robot's analysis indicated technology that should require direct neural interfaces rather than remote reading of brain activity. Malcolm found no manual controls or emergency override panels anywhere in the cockpit area. All surfaces remained smooth and adaptable, with no fixed switches or manual input devices. Energy readings defied standard measurement scales across all monitoring systems. The power source emitted signatures that fluctuated between known energy types too rapidly for stable analysis. Bob's sensors registered patterns that matched theoretical zero-point energy models, but with stability levels that shouldn't be possible. The vessel felt both ancient in its construction materials and impossibly advanced in its systems integration. Carbon dating of hull samples indicated age measurements in centuries, while technology suggested development beyond current human capability. The paradox created cognitive dissonance that made rational analysis difficult. They accessed the primary data core through thought commands that triggered interface points across the walls. Information streams flowed around them in three-dimensional patterns that responded to their focus. The systems continued awakening throughout the ship, with new sections coming online as they explored the data. Control surfaces glowed with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the colony's 13-second cycle. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 9 minutes of reserve remaining, despite the pressurized environment. The numbers reminded him of their limited time as the ship's activation sequences progressed toward unknown endpoints. Bob calculated their survival odds dropping below 20% with each new system that came online. Data streams swirled around Malcolm in three-dimensional patterns that his mind could somehow parse without training. The designation Horizon Project Prototype Alpha appeared in crisp white letters that hovered at eye level. Log entries scrolled beside the identification marker, showing 3 successful test jumps conducted over a 6-month period before project termination. The dates placed the final test exactly 27 years and 4 months earlier. Malcolm watched performance metrics that showed perfect transition completion rates across all 3 missions. The data contradicted the official consortium reports of failed faster-than-light experiments. Engineering specifications unfolded in detailed schematics that rotated slowly in the air. The diagram showed dimensional transition systems instead of standard propulsion technology. The components focused on reality manipulation rather than velocity achievement. Energy allocation charts directed 93% of power to dimensional boundary systems during activation sequences. Malcolm recognized theoretical physics concepts that most engineers considered impossible to implement. The technology created temporary breaches in space-time rather than merely crossing vast distances. Jump 3 logs contained redacted sections that still showed fragments through the censorship fields. The entries mentioned anomalous entities observed during the transition phase. Reality distortion measurements spiked to catastrophic levels 12 seconds into the jump. The logs described containment procedures failing against phenomena that defied physical laws. Final entries used phrases like hostile intent and capabilities beyond our containment measures. The project termination order cited unpredictable dimensional anomalies as the primary reason for shutdown. The consortium hadn't abandoned failed research as publicly claimed. They had successfully achieved interdimensional travel capability and concealed the breakthrough. The technology worked too well according to internal assessments Malcolm accessed through secondary data streams. The project termination resulted from successful transitions that revealed existential risks rather than technical failures. Executive decisions focused on information suppression and facility concealment rather than further development. All records were ordered removed from networked systems to prevent discovery. Malcolm understood why Tranquility Harbor had been preserved with such precision. The colony wasn't merely abandoned. It was converted into a containment facility for technology too dangerous to use but too valuable to destroy. The dimensional breaches created during testing represented threats that required ongoing monitoring and control. The regular energy pulses they detected served as stability maintenance for containment systems. The entire setup functioned as a prison for phenomena that shouldn't exist in their reality. The ship's recognition of his biometrics suggested his identity had been embedded in emergency protocols. Someone had programmed fail-safe systems to respond to specific individuals in case of containment failure. Malcolm's presence had triggered reactivation sequences designed for worst-case scenarios. Bob's analysis showed security clearances that shouldn't exist in his profile, suddenly activating throughout the system. The ship treated him as contingency personnel despite his complete lack of knowledge about the project. Humanity had opened doors that should have remained closed according to the final project assessment. The logs described dimensional boundaries as protective barriers rather than mere physical limitations. Breaching those barriers released entities that operated on physics incompatible with their reality. The consortium chose secrecy over responsibility, concealing the danger rather than addressing it. Malcolm watched data streams that showed the true cost of advancement without wisdom. The empty colony and hidden ship represented the price of knowledge too dangerous to share. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 7 minutes of reserve remaining. The numbers glowed with renewed urgency in his peripheral vision. Bob calculated their survival odds at 19% if they initiated immediate departure. The robot systems detected increasing energy buildup throughout the ship. As activation sequences progressed, Malcolm understood why everything had been hidden with such extreme measures. Some discoveries carried consequences that changed humanity's place in the universe, and not always for the better. Lights intensified throughout the hangar as systems reached critical activation, flooding the space with harsh white illumination that eliminated all shadows. Every display surface flashed the same message in crimson letters. Initialization sequence commenced. The words pulsed in synchronization with the ship's energy buildup, creating a visual rhythm that matched the escalating hum from the teardrop vessel. Hidden compartments hissed open along the ceiling and floor panels, revealing weaponized drones that detached from their charging stations. The security systems emerged with mechanical precision, their forms unfolding into tactical positions that covered all approaches. Full system activation in 15 minutes appeared beneath the primary warning, the numbers counting down with relentless precision. The display showed 14 minutes and 53 seconds remaining when Malcolm first registered the time constraint. The announcement left no opportunity for deliberation or careful planning. Bob's processors calculated response options at maximum capacity, his systems overheating from the computational load. The robot's survival assessment dropped to 12% probability based on the escalating threat matrix. Gravity fluctuations began affecting their movement, making each step unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The drones activated with containment protocols rather than lethal measures, deploying restraint nets and energy-dampening fields. Their design focused on capture rather than elimination, suggesting the facility prioritized information protection over simple security. Each unit moved with coordinated intelligence, forming perimeter patterns that sealed potential escape routes. The ship's energy output began warping local space-time, creating visible distortions in the air around the vessel. Objects appeared to occupy multiple positions simultaneously, their forms shimmering between possibilities. Gravity shifted without warning, dropping to micro levels before surging to 3 times lunar normal. Malcolm stumbled against a console as his weight suddenly increased, his environment suit straining under the pressure. Bob's stabilizers adjusted automatically, but the rapid changes threatened to overwhelm his gyroscopic systems. The air itself seemed to thicken and thin in cycles, making breathing difficult despite the atmosphere. Light bent around the ship in impossible angles, creating optical illusions that confused their depth perception. Bob calculated their survival odds dropping below 10% as additional security measures activated. The robot detected hidden defense systems powering up throughout the facility, their energy signatures matching advanced, non-lethal weaponry. Escape routes began sealing with massive bulkheads that slid from concealed slots in the walls. The mechanisms operated silently despite their size, cutting off retreat paths with finality. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 6 minutes of reserve remaining, the numbers blurring slightly as the space-time distortions affected his display. They had triggered something never meant to be awakened, a process designed for controlled conditions that no longer existed. The ship's activation sequence continued autonomously, ignoring their presence as irrelevant to its programming. Security protocols escalated from containment to full facility lockdown, with emergency barriers deploying across all major corridors. The drones advanced in formation, their restraint systems generating visible energy fields between them. The coordination suggested centralized control that anticipated every movement before they made it. The countdown reached 13 minutes and 20 seconds, the numbers updating with mechanical regularity. Malcolm noted the time matched the original pulse rhythm they'd detected throughout the colony. The synchronization confirmed the entire facility functioned as an integrated system, centered on the ship. Bob's sensors detected the hangar's environmental systems shifting to support the vessel's energy requirements, diverting power from life support and lighting. The illumination flickered as resources were redirected toward the awakening prototype. The security system demanded executive-level authorization that Malcolm couldn't provide. His biometrics granted partial access to the ship's interfaces, but denied all control functions. The recognition system treated him as validated cargo rather than operational commander, permitting observation while blocking any command inputs. Display screen showed his clearance level as Gamma 7, a designation that allowed environmental access but no system overrides. The hierarchical security structure placed him 3 levels below the required authorization threshold. Bob attempted system overrides using standard consortium bypass protocols. The robot's intrusion methods triggered immediate security responses rather than access grants. Additional containment fields activated around the ship's perimeter, creating shimmering energy barriers that sealed all approaches. The drones shifted from containment patterns to active herding maneuvers, directing them toward isolation cells along the hangar's far wall. Their movements showed coordinated intelligence that anticipated every evasion attempt. Malcolm used his salvage tools to create temporary barriers against the advancing security units. He deployed adhesive foam sealant across a 10-meter section of flooring, creating a tacky surface that slowed the drone's progress. The material wouldn't stop them indefinitely, but bought precious seconds for assessment. Their environment suits registered alarming energy fluctuations that spiked with each new security measure. Radiation levels climbed toward hazardous thresholds as the ship's activation sequence continued. The system required either executive codes or complete shutdown to halt the escalating lockdown. Malcolm had neither the credentials nor the knowledge to terminate the processes. Bob's analysis showed the security architecture had multiple layers of protection against unauthorized access. Each attempted override triggered additional defensive measures, rather than vulnerability exploitation. The robot's processing systems reached maximum capacity, analyzing possible breach points. Bob identified a maintenance access route beneath the main floor through structural scanning. The robot detected utility tunnels running parallel to the primary hangar space, accessible through service hatches designed for engineering personnel. The maintenance pathways offered potential escape from the containment fields and drone patrols. Their environment suit showed 5 minutes of oxygen reserve remaining, the numbers updated with each passing second. The drones adapted to the adhesive barrier by deploying anti-stick countermeasures. Small units applied solvent sprays that dissolved the foam within 30 seconds. The coordinated response demonstrated advanced problem-solving capabilities beyond standard security programming. Malcolm recognized the system's intelligence, gathering their tactics and developing counter-strategies in real time. Each attempted resistance resulted in adapted responses that closed potential opportunities. The containment fields intensified around the ship, creating visible distortion patterns in the air. The energy barriers emitted low-frequency hums that vibrated through their environment suits. Malcolm's radiation sensors indicated levels approaching safety limits for short-term exposure. Bob calculated the fields would reach critical intensity within 4 minutes based on their escalation rate. The security drones continued herding them toward the isolation cells with relentless precision. They needed to reach the maintenance access before the containment fields sealed completely. Bob mapped the shortest route to the nearest service hatch while accounting for drone positions. The robot's path planning incorporated the security unit's movement patterns and response times. Malcolm prepared additional diversion tactics using his remaining tools. Their survival odds dropped to 8% with each passing moment of inaction. The countdown to full system activation continued its relentless progression toward completion. They dropped through the service hatch into utility tunnels, the metal rungs cold through Malcolm's gloves. The space below opened into a maze of maintenance corridors that ran beneath the central dome. The passages offered temporary shelter from the pursuing security systems, their narrow confines limiting drone mobility. Bob mapped their route through the complex network while managing power distribution to critical systems. The robot's processors calculated optimal paths based on structural schematics and real-time threat assessments. Security systems adapted to their movement patterns with alarming speed. The drones that followed them into the tunnels modified their search strategies based on observed behavior. They began sealing secondary passages ahead of their position, forcing them toward main thoroughfares. Bob detected communication signals between units that indicated coordinated response planning. The adaptation demonstrated intelligence beyond standard security programming, suggesting centralized control with learning capabilities. Each evasive maneuver resulted in adjusted countermeasures within seconds. Malcolm sacrificed tools and equipment to delay their pursuers. He abandoned a plasma cutter across a junction point, its energy cell rigged to overload when disturbed. The subsequent explosion collapsed 20 meters of tunnel behind them, creating a temporary barrier. He jettisoned scanning equipment and spare oxygen canisters to clear movement speed. Each discarded item represented reduced capabilities for whatever lay ahead, but survival demanded immediate priorities. The sacrifices highlighted their desperate circumstances and dwindling resources. The tunnels vibrated with the ship's increasing energy output, the vibrations growing stronger with each passing minute. Conduits along the walls hummed with power transfers that made the metal surfaces warm to the touch. Dust sifted from ceiling joints with the intensity of the oscillations, creating thin clouds that obscured visibility. The structural integrity of the facility began showing signs of stress from the energy buildup. Support beams emitted creaking sounds that echoed through the narrow passages. Lights flickered as power diverted to the awakening prototype, creating strobing effects that disoriented their movement. The illumination fluctuated between normal brightness and near darkness at irregular intervals. Emergency lighting systems activated briefly before failing due to power drainage. Bob's visual sensors adjusted to the changing conditions, but Malcolm relied on his helmet lights during dark periods. The instability added another layer of difficulty to their navigation through the complex tunnel network. Gravity anomalies made navigation increasingly difficult, shifting without warning between lunar normal and triple weight. The fluctuations affected their balance and movement speed, making each step unpredictable. Malcolm stumbled against wall panels when gravity surged unexpectedly, his environment suit absorbing the impacts. Objects floated momentarily during low-gravity periods before crashing down when normal conditions returned. The physical instability increased the risk of injury and slowed their progress through the maze. They needed to find the security control center to halt the escalating activation sequence. The facility's nerve center offered the only chance to override the automated systems. Bob detected a concentration of backup systems ahead through structural scanning. The robot identified reinforced shielding and independent power sources that suggested critical infrastructure. Their survival depended on reaching that location before the security systems completely adapted to their patterns. The countdown to full activation continued its relentless progression toward completion. Bob's sensors registered energy signatures consistent with emergency command facilities. The concentration of backup systems indicated a hardened location designed for crisis management. The robot calculated their arrival time at 4 minutes based on current movement rates and obstacle avoidance. Their environment suits showed 3 minutes of oxygen reserve remaining, the numbers updated with each gravity shift. Malcolm pushed forward through the unstable conditions, his focus entirely on reaching the control center before time expired. They found the record storage room behind a blast door that still held its atmospheric seal. The space contained rows of hardened data modules stacked in precise formations, each unit protected by individual shielding. Physical storage meant information deemed too dangerous for network transmission, data that required absolute isolation from connected systems. The modules showed no wireless capability and required direct physical connection for access. Their presence indicated secrets the consortium considered catastrophic if discovered. Malcolm connected his scanner to one of the interface ports. The device immediately began downloading files marked with ultraviolet clearance levels. Consortium Directive 37A appeared first in the data stream, its header marked with termination orders for the Horizon project. The document described complete project suspension and prototype securing under minimal maintenance protocols. It detailed personnel reassignments to deep space outposts with communication restrictions. The orders included evacuation under fabricated containment breach scenarios. The logs contained detailed accounts of Jump 3 testing and the entities encountered during dimensional transition. Entries described hostile intent and capabilities beyond containment measures. Researchers documented reality integrity risks that threatened fundamental physics stability. The reports recommended complete dimensional barrier reinforcement to prevent further breaches. Technical assessments warned of catastrophic consequences if the entities gained permanent access to their reality. Executive decisions focused on concealment rather than safety enhancement. The data showed conscious choices to preserve technology over addressing documented risks. Project termination resulted from successful jumps that revealed unacceptable dangers rather than technical failures. The consortium opted for information suppression and facility concealment as primary strategies. All records were removed from networked systems to prevent discovery. The modules contained technical specifications for the override system designed to contain dimensional breaches. Schematics showed a fail-safe mechanism that could initiate controlled antimatter detonation. The system promised complete destruction of the prototype and facility to seal any rifts. Activation required manual intervention from the security center with executive authorization codes. The design emphasized total annihilation as the only certain containment method. They now understood the true scale of the danger represented by the awakening ship. The entities described in the logs operated on physics incompatible with their reality. Dimensional breaches threatened more than local destruction. They risked fundamental changes to universal laws. The consortium's secrecy had prevented proper assessment and preparation for these threats. Their concealment prioritized technological preservation over collective safety. Bob accessed a hidden compartment in his torso housing, extracting a memory chip he'd secretly embedded years earlier. The device contained access codes and security protocols from his previous employment with consortium security. The robot had maintained the data against regulations requiring complete memory wipes after service termination. His systems had preserved the information through multiple memory resets and hardware upgrades. The chip contained authorization data that might bypass the executive code requirements. Bob's analysis showed partial matches with security protocols used in the override system. The robot calculated a 37% chance the codes would grant sufficient access for activation. Their environment suits showed 2 minutes of oxygen reserve remaining, the numbers updated with each data transfer. Malcolm watched the information flow while monitoring security system movements outside the storage room. The physical evidence provided context for the facility's extreme security measures. The data explained the perfect preservation and hidden nature of Tranquility Harbor. Malcolm understood why the colony had been evacuated under false pretenses and sealed from discovery. The consortium had chosen to bury the truth, rather than face the consequences of their technological achievement. The price of their ambition now threatened to come due with the ship's awakening. Bob completed the data extraction and disconnected from the interface. The robot's processors analyzed the override system requirements against his stored codes. Their survival depended on reaching the security center before the activation sequence completed. The countdown continued its progression toward full system engagement, leaving limited time for intervention. Malcolm found the override device hidden behind maintenance panels in the security center. The small console showed signs of hand modification with exposed wiring and custom interfaces. Its label read Last Resort BW in faded handwriting that indicated years of concealment. The note suggested someone had anticipated this exact scenario and prepared accordingly. The interface warned of complete facility destruction in bold red text that pulsed with steady urgency. This was the failsafe designed to contain dimensional breaches when all other measures failed. The system represented the final option for preventing catastrophic reality distortions. Activation would trigger antimatter containment detonation throughout the facility. The process promised total annihilation of everything within the blast radius. The warning message emphasized irreversible consequences with stark clarity. The device required specific executive codes they didn't possess through normal channels. Security protocols demanded authorization levels beyond Malcolm's clearance. Bob's analysis showed the system rejected standard bypass methods with immediate countermeasures. The robot's memory chip contained access data from past employment that might provide partial authorization. His stored codes represented unauthorized preservation of security credentials. The choice presented absolute consequences with no middle ground. Certain death awaited them if the dimensional breach completed successfully. Possible salvation required sacrificing the entire facility and everything within it. The decision carried moral weight that extended beyond their immediate survival. Bob calculated the probability of successful containment at 42% if they activated the system. Malcolm made the decision as the ship reached 60% activation. His environment suit showed 90 seconds of oxygen reserve remaining. The numbers updated with each passing second of consideration. The ship's energy output continued warping local space-time around them. Gravity fluctuations intensified as the activation sequence progressed. The override device interface displayed a countdown timer for the antimatter release. The system required confirmation at 3 separate checkpoints before activation. Each step increased the finality of their decision. Bob inserted his memory chip into the authorization port. The device accepted the codes but warned of irreversible consequences throughout the facility. Security systems continued targeting them despite the escalating crisis. Drones adapted their containment strategies to the changing conditions. The override process created temporary vulnerabilities in the facility's defenses. Malcolm maintained position at the console while Bob managed security countermeasures. Their coordination represented their final collaboration in extreme circumstances. The ship's activation reached 63% as they initiated the override sequence. Energy distortions made the console displays flicker with unstable readings. Malcolm's inputs required multiple attempts due to the environmental instability. The facility's structural integrity continued deteriorating under the strain. Support beams emitted stress sounds that echoed through the security center. They reached the final authorization checkpoint with 78 seconds remaining on the oxygen counter. The override system demanded executive confirmation for antimatter release. Bob's codes provided 80% of the required authorization parameters. The device indicated manual intervention would be necessary for full activation. Malcolm entered the final command sequence with deliberate precision. The console accepted the input after 3 seconds of processing. The system initiated a countdown of 3 minutes until antimatter release. Warning lights activated throughout the facility as the failsafe engaged. Security systems shifted priority to evacuation protocols rather than containment. The change provided temporary relief from the pursuing drones but created new challenges. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 60 seconds remaining at current consumption rates. The numbers glowed with urgent persistence in his peripheral vision. Bob calculated their survival odds at 19% if they reached the lander in time. The facility began structural preparations for the coming detonation. Bulkheads sealed sections in preparation for the controlled annihilation. They reached the security center as space distorted around them, the walls seeming to stretch and compress in rhythmic patterns that defied normal perception. The override device connected to primary control systems through hardened data ports designed for emergency operations. The console displayed system status across multiple monitors that showed the facility's escalating instability. Malcolm secured the connection while Bob maintained watch for pursuing security units. Their environment suits registered 50 seconds of oxygen reserve remaining. Dimensional barrier thinning detected flashed repeatedly across every display surface. The warning appeared in crimson text that pulsed with the ship's energy output. Bob inserted his memory chip into the authorization port, his manipulators operating with precise movements despite the environmental chaos. The system accepted the codes after 3 seconds of verification, but warned of irreversible consequences throughout the facility. The display showed multiple confirmation requirements before activation could proceed. A countdown initiated with 3 minutes until antimatter release. The numbers appeared in large white digits that dominated the central monitor. Each second decreased with mechanical precision that contrasted with the surrounding chaos. The ship's energy field began warping local physics around them, creating visible distortions in the air. Light bent around the security consoles in impossible angles that confused depth perception and movement coordination. Gravity reversed momentarily, throwing them against ceilings with sudden force. The impact strained Malcolm's environment suit and damaged one of Bob's sensor arrays. The robot stabilizers compensated automatically but couldn't prevent the collision. Normal gravity returned after 4 seconds, dropping them back to the floor with equal force. The fluctuations continued at irregular intervals, making sustained movement difficult and dangerous. The facility shook as containment fields destabilized throughout the structure. Support beams emitted stress sounds that echoed through the security center. Monitor displays flickered with power fluctuations as systems diverted energy to critical functions. Bob calculated their optimal route to the lander through the deteriorating conditions. The robot accounted for gravity anomalies and structural instability in his path planning. They had to reach their lander through chaos that increased with each passing second. The countdown showed 2 minutes and 40 seconds remaining when they abandoned the security center. Emergency lighting activated along corridors that showed signs of structural stress. Ceiling panels hung at angles from damaged supports, creating obstacles in their path. Floor sections had buckled from the energy distortions, forming barriers that required careful navigation. The ship's activation reached 75% completion, according to status updates that flashed across surviving monitors. The percentage increased with steady progression despite the override initiation. Dimensional barrier warnings intensified with additional data about reality integrity risks. The system displayed schematic views of the facility that showed multiple stress points developing. Structural integrity continued deteriorating under the combined strain. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 30 seconds of reserve remaining at current consumption rates. The numbers updated with each labored breath through the deteriorating conditions. Bob's power levels dropped to 18% capacity from sustained system operations. The robot prioritized essential functions to maintain navigation and threat assessment capabilities. Their survival depended on reaching the lander before either system failed completely. The countdown reached 2 minutes and 15 seconds as they navigated the final corridor toward the exit. The lander's beacon appeared on their short-range scanners through the interference. Gravity fluctuations intensified near the hangar entrance, making each step unpredictable. Structural vibrations increased in frequency and amplitude as the antimatter containment systems prepared for release. The facility's systems focused on controlled annihilation rather than preservation. They ran through corridors that stretched and compressed in rhythmic patterns that confused their depth perception. The walls seemed to breathe with the ship's energy pulses, expanding and contracting in time. With the escalating activation sequence, light bent around them in impossible angles, creating optical illusions that made navigation treacherous. Their helmet displays showed reality distortion measurements spiking into critical ranges with each passing second. The environment suits registered multiple physics violations that should have been impossible in normal space. Radiation sensors indicated localized gravity field collapses and temporal fluctuations. Security systems continued targeting them despite the escalating chaos. Drones adapted their pursuit strategies to the warping environment, using the distortions to predict their movement patterns. Energy weapons fired through bending light paths that made projectiles appear from unexpected directions. Bob calculated their optimal route through collapsing sections with continuous updates. The robot's processors accounted for structural failures and security countermeasures in real time. His path planning showed survival odds decreasing with each new obstacle encountered. Malcolm used the ship's energy distortions to their advantage when possible. He timed movements to coincide with gravity surges that propelled them forward. The warping space provided temporary cover from security weapons by bending sightlines. He leveraged temporal fluctuations to create gaps in drone surveillance patterns. Each adaptation required split-second decisions based on deteriorating conditions. Their progress became a series of calculated risks through unstable terrain. Doors sealed behind them as bulkheads activated throughout the facility. Emergency containment protocols isolated sections ahead of the antimatter detonation. Each closure eliminated potential retreat options and narrowed their escape path. The mechanisms operated with silent efficiency despite the surrounding chaos. Malcolm's oxygen counter showed 20 seconds of reserve remaining at current consumption rates. The numbers updated with each labored breath through the distorted environment. The lander appeared through a shimmering heat haze that made the craft seem like a mirage. The vehicle's outline wavered in the unstable air, its form shifting between solid and ethereal. Bob confirmed the sighting through multiple sensor readings despite the interference. Their approach required navigating a final corridor that showed severe structural damage. Ceiling panels hung at dangerous angles from compromised supports. Floor sections had buckled upward from underlying stress fractures. They reached the airlock with seconds remaining on multiple countdowns. Malcolm's oxygen reserve showed 8 seconds at current consumption rates. The antimatter detonation countdown reached 45 seconds remaining. The ship's activation sequence hit 89% completion. Bob managed the airlock cycle with maximum priority override. The mechanism operated with agonizing slowness due to power fluctuations throughout the facility. The inner door sealed behind them as the lander's systems came online. Malcolm engaged emergency launch protocols before securing his harness. The engines fired with full thrust capability despite the reactor leak. Their ascent through the hangar opening showed the facility deteriorating below. Structural collapses created cascading failures throughout the central dome. The countdown reached its final moments as they cleared the lunar surface. The lander accelerated toward orbital insertion as the facility completed its destruction sequence. Malcolm watched the display showing the antimatter containment release. The countdown hit 0 as they achieved safe distance. The silent detonation converted matter to pure energy without explosive debris. Their sensors showed perfect containment of the dimensional breach as they continued their escape trajectory. The facility vanished from existence behind them, leaving only empty lunar landscape where truth had been buried. From lunar orbit, they watched Tranquility Harbor vanish. The event occurred without sound or spectacle, a silent erasure from existence. The antimatter detonation converted matter to pure energy in perfect efficiency. Their sensors showed no debris field expanding from the lunar surface. No radiation signatures appeared on their scanners. The crater simply emptied itself of all structures and artifacts. The facility disappeared along with the ship and all physical evidence. Their instruments confirmed complete matter conversion within the designated containment zone. Bob's data chips held the only remaining record of what occurred. The robot's memory contained sensor logs and documentation of their discoveries. Malcolm watched the viewport where the colony had existed moments earlier. The lunar surface showed only undisturbed regolith where complex structures once stood. Their lander sustained damage from the shockwave, but remained functional for station return. The craft's systems stabilized after the initial turbulence from the energy release. Life support recalibrated with adequate oxygen reserves for the journey ahead. Environmental controls maintained cabin pressure despite minor hull stress fractures. Navigation systems calculated a return trajectory to the nearest orbital station. The reactor leak continued at reduced rates after the emergency shutdown procedures. Malcolm stared at the empty crater where truth had been buried. The consortium's secret remained safe from discovery but not forgotten. Their sensors confirmed perfect containment of the dimensional breach. No energy signatures indicated residual portal activity or entity presence. The lunar environment showed no contamination from the antimatter reaction. The silence felt more profound than the vacuum surrounding them. Bob's systems continued analyzing the sensor data from the detonation. The robot confirmed total conversion of all matter within the blast radius. His calculations showed energy release patterns consistent with theoretical models. The lander's computers stored the last readings from the facility. Malcolm reviewed the final moments before the annihilation sequence completed. The display showed clean termination of all dimensional phenomena. Their escape trajectory placed them on course for Aldrin Station with minimal course corrections. The lander's propulsion systems operated at 80% efficiency after the shockwave impact. Life support indicators showed sufficient resources for the transit duration. Malcolm monitored the reactor output for any signs of critical failure. The silence in the cockpit felt heavier than the vacuum outside. The empty crater on the lunar surface represented more than physical absence. It marked the burial site of dangerous knowledge and suppressed history. Malcolm understood the weight of their exclusive awareness. Bob's memory contained truths that could reshape human understanding of reality. The consortium's secret remained preserved through destruction rather than disclosure. Their lander continued toward the station with its singular cargo of concealed knowledge. The stars shone with indifferent clarity through the viewport. Malcolm watched the familiar constellations that had guided travelers for centuries. Their patterns felt different after witnessing dimensional boundaries nearly fail. Each point of light might conceal other doors that shouldn't be opened. The quiet hum of the lander's systems provided constant reminder of their narrow escape. The journey back would be spent in contemplation of what they'd nearly unleashed. Malcolm reviewed the data they'd saved from destruction, the files glowing on his console in the quiet of the lander's cabin. The evidence proved consortium knowledge of dimensional risks they had deliberately concealed. Internal directives showed conscious decisions to hide successful interdimensional travel capability after discovering its dangers. Technical logs documented entities encountered during testing that defied containment protocols. The records revealed systematic suppression of information that threatened public safety. Revealing the truth would bring relentless retaliation from corporate enforcers. The consortium maintained surveillance networks across all major stations and settlements. Their security forces had jurisdiction in most corporate-controlled sectors. Bob calculated a 23% chance of successful disclosure without immediate interception. The probability accounted for communication monitoring and data interception protocols. Independent media outlets might protect source identity through encryption and anonymity networks. Their track records showed mixed results against corporate pressure campaigns. Silence meant allowing the same danger to emerge elsewhere in the solar system. The consortium had likely established similar research facilities at other isolated locations. Their pattern of concealment suggested multiple hidden projects with comparable risks. Bob's analysis indicated 78% probability of additional dimensional research sites. The threat wouldn't remain contained to one lunar facility forever. Sooner or later, another breach would occur with potentially catastrophic consequences. Their lives would become endless flight from corporate enforcers if they chose disclosure. The consortium employed specialized teams for asset recovery and information containment. These units operated with legal authority across corporate territories. Malcolm's face would appear on watch lists at every major port and station. Bob's identification codes would trigger security alerts throughout networked systems. They would need to avoid all regulated travel routes and monitored settlements. Humanity deserved to know what waited in the darkness between dimensions. The consortium's secrecy represented betrayal of public trust on fundamental levels. Their concealment endangered everyone by preventing proper preparation and research. Malcolm believed people had the right to understand threats to their existence. The decision wasn't about personal safety but collective responsibility. Some truths carried moral weight that outweighed individual consequences. Malcolm began encrypting files for distribution through multiple channels. His fingers moved across the console with deliberate precision, creating layered security protocols. He established deadman switches that would trigger automatic release if compromised. The encryption methods used quantum-resistant algorithms that should withstand cracking attempts. Bob verified the security measures while maintaining sensor watch for approaching vessels. Their lander continued its steady course toward the orbital station, its systems operating with quiet efficiency. The data packets contained everything they'd recovered from the lunar facility. Technical specifications showed the dimensional transition systems in detail. Log entries documented the entities encountered during testing. Executive decisions revealed conscious choices to conceal rather than address the dangers. Malcolm included sensor readings from their own experience with the awakening ship. The complete picture showed technology too dangerous for secret development. Bob monitored communication channels for any signs of increased security activity. The robot's sensors detected normal traffic patterns around their position. No unusual vessel movements appeared on long-range scanners. The calm felt more threatening than overt pursuit would have been. Malcolm completed the encryption process and prepared distribution protocols. Their course would take them near a communications buoy in 17 minutes. The decision point approached with silent inevitability. They approached Aldrin Station with encrypted data ready for transmission. The stars outside their viewport looked different after what they'd witnessed at Tranquility Harbor. Each pinpoint of light no longer represented mere astronomical objects, but potential gateways to other dimensions. The silent darkness between stars felt charged with unseen possibilities and threats. Malcolm's perception had shifted from seeing space as empty to recognizing it as layered with hidden realities. The consortium's extreme secrecy suggested multiple similar projects concealed throughout the solar system. Bob monitored communications channels for any alerts related to their actions. The robot's sensors swept across standard and encrypted frequencies with methodical precision. His processors analyzed traffic patterns for anomalies that might indicate pursuit or Yujing. Station security showed no unusual activity or heightened alert status on their approach. Docking control transmitted standard welcome protocols and berth assignment. The normalcy felt more threatening than the overt danger they'd left behind on the lunar surface. Calm procedures suggested either ignorance or sophisticated containment strategies. Their action might prevent future catastrophes by exposing the dimensional risks. It could also trigger aggressive responses from the consortium that would endanger countless lives. Malcolm weighed the moral calculus of disclosure against the certainty of corporate retaliation. Bob calculated probabilities of various outcomes based on available data. The numbers provided cold comfort without accounting for unpredictable human reactions. Each potential scenario carried significant risks for themselves and others. The station grew larger in their viewport, its rotating rings moving with steady predictability. Docking procedures commenced automatically as they entered the designated approach corridor. Malcolm's hands rested on the controls without making adjustments. The automated systems guided them toward their assigned berth with effortless precision. Bob continued monitoring for any deviation from standard security protocols. His sensors detected nothing beyond routine traffic management and safety checks. Somewhere between dimensions, something remained waiting behind the veil they'd nearly torn open. The memory of the entities described in the logs lingered in Malcolm's thoughts. Their hostile intent and capabilities represented threats beyond conventional understanding. The consortium's decision to conceal rather than confront these dangers felt increasingly irresponsible. Silence would only guarantee that others would eventually encounter similar threats unprepared. The data in their possession represented both burden and responsibility. Malcolm initiated the first data packet transmission to independent receivers. The encrypted files began uploading through secure channels Bob had established. The process used quantum-resistant algorithms to prevent interception or decoding. Each packet contained fragments of the truth about the Horizon Project and its consequences. The transmission represented a deliberate breach of corporate security protocols. Their lander docked with the station as the final packets completed transfer. The airlock connected with a solid thump that vibrated through the hull. Standard atmosphere equalization procedures commenced automatically. Malcolm watched the status indicators change from red to green along the docking interface. Bob's sensors confirmed environment matching between the lander and station. The robot's threat assessment updated to include potential risks within the station itself. Their immediate survival depended on maintaining the appearance of normal salvage operators. The first response arrived within minutes of transmission completion. Encrypted acknowledgments appeared on Malcolm's console from 3 independent media outlets. The messages confirmed receipt, without revealing editorial intentions or security status. Bob analyzed the encryption patterns for signs of compromise or tracing attempts. The responses showed standard journalistic security protocols with no evidence of corporate interference. The truth had begun its journey into the world beyond their control. Malcolm powered down the lander's primary systems with deliberate slowness. Each switch activation felt like closing a chapter while opening unknown possibilities. The console lights dimmed in sequence until only emergency power remained active. Bob disconnected from the ship's network and assumed standby mode. The silence that followed felt heavier than the vacuum outside. They had set forces in motion that would inevitably shape their future, and potentially humanity's understanding of reality itself. Their lander docked at Aldrin's secondary port with standard automated procedures. Station officials processed their entry without special attention or security alerts. The customs scan showed routine radiation levels and standard salvage markings. The dockmaster's voice came through the comm with board efficiency, listing berthing fees and maintenance charges. Malcolm provided his identification codes without hesitation, his voice steady through the audio filter. Bob monitored the data exchange from his interface, watching for any anomalies in the verification process. The routine felt both reassuring and ominous in its normalcy. Every moment carried risk of detection and capture as they went through processing. Security cameras tracked their movement from multiple angles along the docking arm. Malcolm maintained the relaxed posture of a routine salvage operator returning from deep space. His hands didn't shake as he signed the electronic customs forms. Bob's sensors detected no unusual energy signatures or security preparations. The station's automated systems treated them like any other returning vessel. The lack of immediate response felt more threatening than overt action would have been. Malcolm distributed data copies through multiple secure channels from the lander's console. He initiated 7 separate transmissions to independent media outlets using quantum-resistant encryption. Each packet contained fragments of the complete dataset about the Horizon project. The transmissions used bounce protocols that routed through multiple relay stations. Bob established false trails to divert consortium investigators by creating deceptive data signatures. The robot generated phantom transmissions that appeared to originate from different sectors entirely. They maintained their cover as simple salvage operators during the unloading process. Malcolm moved cargo containers with practiced efficiency, his movements matching those of other dock workers. Bob's industrial manipulators handled heavy equipment without drawing attention. Their lander showed appropriate wear and tear for a vessel of its age and purpose. The dock records listed their cargo as standard lunar minerals and salvage materials. Nothing in their appearance or actions suggested they carried the most dangerous secret in the solar system. The first media queries began reaching their encrypted accounts within hours of transmission. Malcolm monitored the secure channels from a public terminal in the station's commerce sector. The messages arrived with increasing frequency as news organizations verified the data. Consortium stock fluctuations indicated nervousness among investors who detected the emerging story. Share prices dropped 3% in the first trading cycle after their arrival. The financial tremors suggested the information was already affecting corporate stability. The truth began its journey to the public through carefully managed disclosure channels. Malcolm watched confirmation messages arrive from 3 major independent media outlets. The responses used layered encryption that Bob verified as authentic journalistic security protocols. Their lander remained docked at the secondary port while they monitored the situation. Station security continued normal patrol patterns without increased alert status. The calm surface concealed the growing tension beneath. They prepared for whatever consequences might follow their actions. Malcolm secured additional supplies and fuel for rapid departure if necessary. Bob monitored all station communications for signs of coordinated response. Their escape routes remained available through 3 different launch bays. The consortium's reaction would determine their next movements, whether they could remain hidden or needed to flee immediately. The waiting felt more exhausting than the physical danger they'd faced on the lunar surface. Each passing hour increased the probability of discovery and retaliation. The universe holds doors that should remain closed. Malcolm's choice to share the truth shows that some knowledge demands collective vigilance, not corporate secrecy. Humanity's future depends on facing hidden dangers with open eyes, neither ignoring the risks nor hoarding the warnings. Beyond the silent void of space where stars hang like distant lanterns, something waits between dimensions. It does not sleep. It does not forget. Patient and hungry, it watches for the next portal to open, the next threshold to cross. Our only defense is to be ready.